As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So amid Israel's slaughter in Gaza, U.S. and Israeli officials met in Washington this week to discuss the advancement of major weapons deals that will arm Israel with dozens of fighter jets, Apache helicopters, and munitions. One of these deals includes a new squadron of 25 F-35 fighter jets and is worth about $3 billion. So Israel's defense ministry first announced its intention to procure the 25 F-35s last summer. And when they made that announcement, they said these jets would be purchased using U.S. military aid. So that's right, the U.S. taxpayer is footing the bill for this. Sources told the Times of Israel that Israel also intends to procure a squadron of 25 F-15IA fighter jets and a squadron of 12 Apache helicopters. It's unclear how the F-15s and Apaches will be paid for, but we do know that the U.S. is looking to give Israel an additional $14 billion in military aid, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's paid for by the U.S., and that's on top of the $3.8 billion that Israel receives each year. But he was also discussing the continued supply of American bombs and other types of munitions to support the Israeli slaughter in Gaza. The U.S. has delivered over 10,000 tons of weapons to Israel since October 7th, demonstrating the strong U.S. support for Israel's campaign, which has killed over 25,000 Palestinians. The latest numbers from Gaza's health ministry is 25,900, and that includes 10,000 children. 10,000 children. And this is what the U.S. is doing while that's happening. They're working to get them new fighter jets, new helicopters, so they could drop more bombs on Palestinians. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin confirmed on Thursday that the U.S. and Iraq will start talks on the future of the U.S. military presence in Iraq in the coming days, and this could potentially result in a U.S. withdrawal, and that would be amazing. Iraq has been calling for an end to the presence of the U.S.-led anti-ISIS coalition as the U.S. has been bombing Iraq, and the tensions are really soaring with these Shia militias targeting U.S. bases in both Iraq and Syria over the slaughter that's happening in Gaza. And Iraq is on the brink of another major war. It's the last thing anybody in Iraq needs. And Austin said that the two countries will convene a meeting of the U.S.-Iraq Higher Military Commission, which was formed last summer, signaling that the U.S. wants to maintain some sort of presence in Iraq. Austin said that the HMC will, quote, enable the transition to an enduring bilateral security partnership between the United States and Iraq, end quote. So that kind of sounds like they might want to keep some kind of troop presence, maybe not under this code. Like, they're probably going to try to finagle something here, saying that they want a enduring bilateral security partnership. So there's also been reports that indicate the U.S. is also considering ending its military occupation of eastern Syria. So one thing that, as far as I understand it, the U.S. occupation of eastern Syria relies on support from Iraq, from the U.S. presence in Iraq. So there's about 900 troops in eastern Syria, and the U.S. also backs the SDF, that's the Kurdish group. So that gives the U.S. controls a significant chunk of Syria's territory. Sources within the Pentagon and the State Department told Foreign Policy that the White House is no longer invested in sustaining a mission that it perceives as unnecessary. And this article in Foreign Policy is pretty funny because it's Charles Lister, who's a total neocon, pro-Syria proxy warrior. And it says, America is planning to withdraw from Syria and create a disaster. So he's not happy about it. But I'm very happy to hear these reports because the U.S. presence in Iraq and Syria is just a tripwire for a major war. And the U.S. is also waging a brutal economic war against Syria with crippling sanctions, and they occupy their oil fields. Really, just ending that would be great. But anyway, so this just seems like very preliminary discussions that are happening. Nobody's saying that they're going to get out, but they're discussing it. Articles from Kyle Anselon at the Libertarian Institute. And it says, U.S. officials now believe that North Korea will conduct a lethal attack against South Korea. And this is based on a report from the New York Times, although the U.S. assesses that North Korea will attempt to limit its attack to avoid a full-scale war. So the New York Times report said that the officials have assessed that Kim's recent harder line is part of a pattern of provocations, but that his declarations have been more aggressive than previous statements and should be taken seriously. While the officials added that they did not see an imminent risk of a full-scale war on the Korean Peninsula, Kim could carry out strikes in a way that he thinks would avoid rapid escalation. There's recently an article in 38 North by North Korea experts Robert Carlin and Siegfried Hecker warning of a potential war on the peninsula. Their article said, quote, "The literature on surprise attacks should make us very wary of the comfortable assumptions that resonate in Washington's echo chamber, but might not have purchase in Pyongyang. This might seem like madness, but history suggests those who have convinced themselves that they have no good options left will take the view that even the most dangerous game is worth the candle," end quote. And then there was John Pfeffer writing over at Responsible Statecraft. He was saying to take the warning from those two guys seriously, but he also explained that Kim's fiery statements might signal that Pyongyang seeks peace and not war, hoping that it could lead to negotiations, could lead to the U.S. saying, all right, maybe we should back down here. One thing that they recently did was North Korea is going to declare South Korea like an enemy. They're going to no longer work toward reconciliation or reunification. And this is a result of the U.S. and South Korea restarting these huge war games, these provocative war games. Some even simulate assassinations of Kim Jong-un. And the North Korea responds by firing missiles and artillery. And the tensions it's just tit for tat escalation. And it is one of those situations that most people ignore, kind of just used to these things happening on the Korean Peninsula. Same way people are just used to Gaza being under blockade for all these years. You know, you never know when this stuff could really explode. And there's nukes involved here. The U.S. recently sent a nuclear armed submarine to South Korea as one of its provocations.
You run your mouth and I run my business, brother. You tell everybody I'm busted. You talk so much you got me disgusted. But you run your mouth and I run my business, brother.
All right, we got to listen to the Carrie Lake phone call. And Carrie Lake, she's a fucking pimp-ass baller. She's just sitting there calmly eating some nuts on a phone call going, yeah, well, who wants me out? And why do they want me out? Okay, and so what is the offer? And she's great because she records the phone call, but she just keeps saying, hey, they should just support me, but then prying a little bit just to get this guy to give a little bit more information up. And does this guy not sound exactly like what you think these conversations must sound like behind closed doors? I mean, this guy is a movie character of a slimeball politician going, listen, I'm just doing you a favor here. I just want to give you a call. And I want to let you know that we can really make this work for you. And we're not saying that we don't support you. We're not saying that you wouldn't be great. It's just for a couple of years, we would love it if you could be on the sidelines. And if you could just tell us what amount of money it would take for you just to spend a little bit of time on the sidelines. And, things might not be that great if you don't go to the sidelines. And listen, I'm just the messenger here. I'm just trying to report to you that you have an opportunity for greatness, because if you'll work with us, there's a paycheck for you and it's still an opportunity down the line to pursue the dreams that you're interested in. How many times, I bet behind closed doors, this is what every single conversation is like. And that's why I was saying bet on boredom, because the Donald Trump wheelings and dealings will happen behind closed doors. I'll get that phone call. Hey, you can be in office, but you got to put this person as your VP. You got to put this guy as your Secretary of State. Hey, if you don't want us opening up this file, you don't want us doing this, you're going to have to play a little bit of ball. So let's play the tape. You guys can tell me how the sound is, and let's give this one a listen.
So what's going on? I'm assuming this is our friend.
This is back east. There are very powerful people who want to keep you out.
I know they do.
But they're willing to put their money where their mouth is in a big way. So this conversation never happened.
This is crazy, though. They should want me. I'm a great candidate. People love me. These people are corrupt.
Well, maybe you're right.
They are right. They are corrupt.
Maybe. This is react. Don't go. You never know. I'll get myself in trouble. If you say no, which is fine, it's your choice. Don't tell people.
They're gonna try to have me murdered.
Today's world, man. If that stuff that came out last week is right about the cartel stuff, I mean, right? They say the cartel's operating in 50 states right now, like all 50. You know? So
what's going on? Who is it? What?
Forget the who. Let me just tell you the what. Let's just say there are people.
You got to love the graciness of the guy, even just the tone of his voice. Listen, forget the who. We're not going to talk about the who, but let me be the messenger here. Let me tell you the what. And by the way, remember, we've got cartel people in every state, ones that we snuck over the border just for moments like.
Calling around saying, gosh, no, they can't repeat this. Never repeat this. If you say no, don't. Because I got offered to buy out. Don't. Because then we lose our ability to get things done in the future.
Here's my problem. Rather than just say, let's work with her, she's a great candidate, because they don't own me, and it pisses me off.
Yeah, it's not about ownership.
It's about control.
I don't know if it's about control. It's about being on the team. I guess that's, you know what I mean?
They want to be on the team.
They want you to be on their team.
But
team,
But if they're pushing a globalist.
Isn't this fun? The way these slime bells talk, where it's just pure pivot in sales. So they want to control me. Well, they don't want to control you. They just want you to play on their team and do everything they say. But that's not a control thing. They just want to know that you're with them and that you're going to play ball with what they want. But we wouldn't call that control. That's not what we're talking about here.
Agenda, I can't do that. So what do they want? What do they want me to do?
You want to stay out for 2 years. What? I'll tell you what I can offer you. What? I said, you can do whatever you want. It's talking head, isn't it? So the ask of me was, it's kind of funny. So the ask I got today from back east was, is there any companies out there or something that could just put her on the...
By the way, doesn't the ask I got from back east just sound so mob? Doesn't this feel like right out of Casino when they're talking about the bosses back home, back east? Hey, listen, I talked to the people back east and here's what they had to say. This is some real mob shit. And I love how like uncomfortable he even is doing this, where he's got to be real greasy about it. And he goes, well, let me tell you what we can offer you. Let me at least just tell you what there's some good here. Let me tell you what we can get for you.
Payroll and give her to keep her out. And I said, well, what do you want to do? Like, whatever we need to do.
This is about defeating Trump. And I think that's a bad thing for our country. DeSantis is not America first. This is about the final death blow to Trump. And I don't think that's good for our country.
I love Trump. I love Trump.
It's not good for our country, Jeff.
It's not. But at the same time, I'm not even sure Trump can win. I don't know if he can win. I think what it really comes down to for a lot of people, it's not really about like control or agenda. It's just about the ability to raise money to win. You know, if you really want to know, all of politics boils down to money. I think. And even on their end, like what makes them the most money.
I know all these consultants don't want their payday to end, and I don't want to make a deal with these kind of people. This is a hill worth dying on. I'm not. If they're going to steal the election to make me and our movement go away, I'm not letting them do that. I owe it to the people of Arizona to carry their torch and their voice.
Or you don't go away, but you pause.
This is the battles right now, Jeff.
Enough of that, but you guys get the point, and I think that these kind of wheelings and dealings and conversations are happening behind the scenes all the time.
The Peter Schiff Show.
Debt is growing much faster than the economy. So are we getting richer or are we getting poorer? You know, if you're just looking at your assets and not looking at your liabilities, you could think you're really rich. Yes, I grew my assets by $100,000. I'm $100,000 richer. Well, what if your liabilities grew by $200,000? You're $100,000 poorer. Right, but if you just focus on one side of the balance sheet and you ignore what's going on the other side, you can pretend anything. That's what we're doing. We're looking at what did we grow the economy to, but we're not looking at all the money we had to borrow to get that growth. If we had to borrow $1 to get 10 cents worth of economic growth, was it really worth it? Was it worth going into debt? No. Did we borrow ourselves into riches? No, we didn't. We borrowed ourselves deeper into debt and poverty. Plus also, not only do we have more debt, right, to show for this small amount of supposed growth, but now we have to service that debt. We have to repay that debt with interest. So that diminishes economic growth in the future when we're burdened by the responsibility to repay and service this debt. So this is not real economic growth. Right? The economy is shrinking. We're covering it up with debt and spending, and we're looking at the result of that, which is this GDP number, and we're pretending everything is great. And again, another reason, too, that the GDP numbers go up is because we don't adjust them enough for the real rate of inflation. The deflator maybe captures half of the inflation, and that overstates economic growth. That's another reason the government likes to underreport inflation, is because every time they underreport inflation, they get a twofer. They tell the public that inflation is lower, which is good, but they also get to tell them that economic growth is higher, which is also good, right? So they lie about these numbers, and it's not like they just lie. The methodology for computing the numbers is a lie. So the numbers are designed not to be accurate. They're designed to understate inflation and overstate growth, and so they work the way they were designed to work. We are bottoming out when it comes to inflation, and we got more economic news this week that confirms that we've bottomed out. First of all, oil prices quietly rose about $5 a barrel this week. Nobody really talked about it, but we closed above $78 a barrel, 78.23. I think that's last, up another 87 cents today, although they may adjust it a bit, later in the day. But that's $5 a barrel higher than we were a week ago. That's a pretty big move. I think we're getting ready for an explosive move up in oil prices. I mean, I've thought that for a while, but we pulled back. But the charts to me look like we got a lot of support and we're going much higher. And I think that higher oil prices are going to bleed into the headline CPI numbers before the election. So we're going to start to see a meaningful impact, and we're going to be moving farther and farther away from the Fed's 2% goal and closer to that 9.1% level that was the peak. But also some other indicators to me that show that inflation is coming back, other than the fact that I know that it's never gone away because we haven't had an increase in savings and a decrease in borrowing and spending, record government spending, record personal spending, debt record high. So this is all inflationary policy on the fiscal side. All this stuff is not what you do when you're trying to win an inflation fight. But look at the money supply. We got the M2 money supply earlier this week, and it rose for the month. This is a monthly number that we get. Every month they tell you the M2. And it was up 0.5% in 1 month. That's a big increase, almost $100 billion in new money added to the economy in a month. Now, that's inflation, right? The expansion of the money supply, the expansion of the credit supply. Now, M2 did start contracting from about the middle, I think it was June-ish or so of 2022. And for about maybe 9-10 months, money supply was coming down. Now, compared to how much it went up in the few years prior, you can barely see it on a chart. But yes, it was a slight decline from the peak. So money supply went like this, and then a little teeny bit down, right? Now it's going back up. It's kind of been bumping around, and now it's turned higher. And I think money supply is going to surge before the end of this year. It's going to hit a new all-time high in money supply. So money supply is growing. What does that tell you about inflation? That is inflation. And the credit never stopped growing. Even though money supply came down a bit, credit supply never did. It kept on expanding. And for most Americans, I mean, they're pretty much indifferent to money or credit. I mean, they both work, right? You don't need any money when you go into a store. You have a credit card, you could buy just as much stuff as a guy that has actual money, right? So all of this is part of the demand that is pushing prices higher. All of this money supply growth, this is the big pivot. It's going to be back to quantitative easing, which is going to be done for a multiple of reasons. One is to prop up the banks. Two, to prop up the government, because the government can't afford to pay the interest on the debt. And so the Fed is cognizant of this as much as it denies that that's what's driving policy. That is absolutely what's driving policy. But it's also the election. The Federal Reserve wants to reelect Biden. They always want to reelect the incumbent. That's the deal, right? Every time you're an incumbent, the deal is the Fed's going to help you. And, if you're the party that's on the outside trying to get in, that's a problem until you actually win. Because once you win, now you get the same cushy deal with the Fed. That's right. Whoever is in charge gets the Fed's help. That's the way it works. And it's not a coincidence because whoever is in charge is that's the guy or gal who reappoints the Fed chairman, right? So you want to help your boss, right, if you want to keep your job. But I think, as I said, Powell knows that his chance of keeping his job in the Trump administration is slim because even though Trump appointed him, he wanted to fire him. I mean, as soon as he started hiking rates, he wanted to fire him. So he's not going to hire him again. He's going to replace him with somebody else, right? So the person most likely to reappoint Powell is Biden.
Let's start out, first of all, with maybe a definition of the term alien. And in May of 1779, Thomas Jefferson drafted a bill of who should be deemed citizens of Virginia. And he described aliens like this: all others not being citizens of any of the United States of America shall be deemed aliens. And the founding generation and the old revolutionaries as well widely understood aliens to fall under two categories: alien friends and alien enemies. We can trace this back to Blackstone's commentary, 1765-ish. It may go further back than that. My friend Joe Wolverton would probably know better than me. And here's how Blackstone put it: when I mention the rights of an alien, I must be understood of alien friends only, or such whose countries are in peace with ours. For alien enemies have no rights, no privileges, unless by the king's special favor during the time of war. So an alien is either an alien friend, those people who are from nations that the country is not at war with. Alien enemies are, well, they don't have any rights or whatever, and those are people from countries with whom you are at war with. James Madison agreed with this in his report of 1800, January 7th, 1800. He said the general practice of nations distinguishes between alien friends and alien enemies. The latter it has proceeded against according to the law of nations. We're talking about Vattel and others. by expelling them as enemies. So if you're an alien enemy and that means you're at war with somebody, you just get expelled. That's the standard practice. The former, alien friends, it is considered under a local and temporary allegiance. Allegiance is an important thing. You have to actually take allegiance. Well, I mean, you may not have to have a formal practice, but it's assumed that there's an allegiance to where you are currently staying. It's a temporary one, and you're entitled to a correspondent protection. If contrary instances are to be found, said James Madison, in barbarous countries, under undefined prerogatives or amid revolutionary dangers, they will not be deemed fit precedents for the government of the United States, even if not beyond its constitutional authority. And so that's the description from James Madison. John Jay, the first Chief Justice, as first Chief Justice in 1793, agreed. He discussed it like this. The question arising on this plea, this is Ware versus Hilton, I believe, is whether, admitting the facts plea to be pled to be true, the King of Great Britain hath become an enemy of the United States in that sense which would justify the court in considering his subjects as being alien enemies and consequently incapable of maintaining actions in our court. So one of the legal things that was triggered under the laws of nations is you couldn't have an action in a court in a country with where your country is at war. And so there was some legal things going on after the Treaty of Paris. And of course, John Jay pointed out that just because someone tends to look at you in a hostile way, that doesn't mean you are in a state of war. He said there is a wide distinction between a power who is unfriendly and inimical to, and a power actually at war with the United States, and they with him. Here, Thomas Jefferson, in a 1792 letter, this one's widely cited as maybe one of the greatest acts of diplomatic communications at the time. He was responding to a dispute over the Treaty of Paris. And he noted this same situation. He says, the judge seems to have been of opinion that it was necessary that the treaty should be definitively concluded before it could become a law of the land, so as to change the legal character of an alien enemy who cannot maintain an action into that of an alien friend who may. Thomas Jefferson described it like this in the Kentucky resolutions. He said, alien friends are under the jurisdiction and protection of the laws of the state. So the state on alien friends are the ones who make the migration laws about aliens. Each state makes their own wherein they are. So they're under the jurisdiction of the laws of the state wherever they are. And that no power over them has been delegated to the United States nor prohibited to the individual states distinct from their power over citizens. That's Thomas Jefferson's view on alien friends versus alien enemies. Madison again, he said, it is said further that by the law and practice of nations, aliens, anyone, may be removed at discretion for offenses against the law of nations, that Congress are authorized to define and punish such offenses, and that to be dangerous to the peace of society is, in aliens, one of those offenses. But the distinction here again, if you are violating the peace of society, the question is, are you an alien friend or an alien enemy? And that determines in law who is making the decision over who is going to allow them or deal with them. Alien friends, that is going to get down to always the states. Enemies, if you're at war, that's always the federal government. And that's how Madison describes it. The distinction between alien enemies and alien friends is a clear and conclusive answer to this argument. Alien enemies are under the law of nations and liable to be punished for offenses against it. Alien friends, except in the single case of public ministers, are under the municipal law and must be tried and punished according to that law only. So it's state and local law for people from countries with which the United States is not at war. Next up, Madison addresses the necessary and proper clause argument. Of course, people say everything is necessary, everything is proper. Of course, people with power think that everything is necessary for them to do. And of course, this is under the legal doctrine of principles and incidents. There's a principal power and there's incidental, not implied, but incidental power that is a lesser power to carry out the main power. And that's what Madison discusses as well. He said, it is said that the right of removing aliens is an incident to the power of war vested in Congress by the Constitution. He said, this is a former argument in a new shape only, and is answered by repeating that the removal of alien enemies is an incident to the power of war. The removal of alien friends is not an incident to the power of war. So James Madison's view. He also mentions invasion specifically. He says invasion is an operation of war. To protect against invasion is an exercise of the power of war. A power, therefore, not incident to war cannot be incident to a particular modification of war. So he's still saying unless you are actually at war with the other country, it's the state's decision. The feds have no say over this whatsoever. He says, and as the removal of alien and friends has appeared to be no incident to a general state of war, it cannot be incident to a partial state or a particular modification of war. So he's also pointing out, now just because we're calling them alien friends doesn't mean that they're your buddy. They might be. This is more of a technical or a legal term when we're looking back to Blackstone and how the founders and John Jay and so many others viewed this. And so when you're saying alien friends, you're just referring to what nation that they're from and whether or not the United States is at war with that nation. So if it's an alien friend, The federal government has no say whatsoever.
And I think we have somebody helping us out. Wrote an article about why we should audit the Fed. I can't imagine who in the world would do such a thing. Chris.
Well, it's actually a senator that we both like, Dr. Paul. His name is Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky.
Oh,
and yes, he is out there calling for an audit of the Fed. What a wonderful idea. Because of the secrecy, nobody could know what they're up to. And I just want to go into a little history. This isn't the first time that America has had to deal with a central bank. We've had central banks in the past that were closed down. Ever since the very beginning, Alexander Hamilton wanted a central bank. So they wanted this right away. The Fed, unfortunately, is the only one that's stuck, and it has stuck with us for 100 years now. But back in the early 1800s, there was the second bank of the United States. That was the central bank at the time, and its president, his name was Nicholas Biddle. And listen to his words. It could be said by, Jerome Powell today. He said, quote, "We believe that the prosperity of the bank and its usefulness to the country depend on its being entirely free from the control of the officers of the government. In order to preserve that independence, it must never connect itself with any administration." Now, I'll agree with that it should never be connected with any administration. We don't want Nancy Pelosi printing money, or Lindsey Graham or Nikki Haley. God forbid, if they had the printing press, we'd be in wars all the time, and we would collapse a lot faster. But neither should a private bank be able to print money either. That doesn't make it right just because politicians can't print money. It's wrong for a private bank to print dollars, period. And that was actually in the Constitution, one of the federal laws, no counterfeiting. So they outsourced it to a private bank, and they do it in secret. You don't know what they're doing. Like Nicholas Biddle said, we're independent. You don't need to see what we're doing, and that's how it is with the Fed. And what are they doing? Who are they bailing out? Are they giving money to foreign countries, foreign corporations, U.S. corporations? What's happening? And it's all happening in secret. And Rand Paul is saying, we need to audit. We need to see what's happening. What are you doing? And of course, they're going to say, oh, no, we are independent. You can't see. It's like Pfizer. You could see about the vaccine in 75 years. Well, the Fed's even worse. You could never see what they're doing. So it's all, bad stuff. But hopefully the good senator from Kentucky can make some inroads.
That that word independent is important, because anytime I had conversation with the Fed people and argued the case for transparency, it's just one of the reasons why we were able to get at least passed in the House to audit the Fed. But their argument always was independence, and you mentioned that, Chris, because independence means keeping it out of the hands of the bad people. But that can be done by just following the Constitution. What they were concerned about in the Constitution was there was a lot of inflation. The continental dollar was inflated, and they had that on their mind. But the states generally issued paper money. They called it bills of credit. So the Constitution prohibits the states from using bills of credit. But this is one place where there's been progress. There's several states now of the people who are interested in this. They had gone to the state where it belongs. It's up to the states because it's explicit to the state. The states can't use anything else other than gold and silver. So what they have done in these several states has been to make sure it was legal to exchange gold and silver and get rid of the taxes placed on it. So if you have gold coins and you buy them and then use them or sell them or whatever, that there would be capital gains taxes and sales taxes could be put on it. But now that is spreading, and I think that is great, because as the federal system breaks down, there will be more of this, and that's why I think getting rid of these taxes are so important. But this to me is an issue that is not going to go away. We need to let the market deal with this. And Chris, and you described it so well, this contest going on about the Fed. It's been going on for a long time. I think Jefferson and Hamilton had a bit of a discussion on that, because obviously Jefferson was a gold standard person and he was against the national bank, and Hamilton argued the other side, and there's been some ups and downs, but right now it looks like Hamilton's been winning the political power, but what he's not winning is the hearts of minds and men's and the economic conditions that we have, because there's a mess out there, and the Fed is totally useless, and right now everything they do, there's a scheme to it, but what they won't admit to, they say, well, we spend a lot of time, we have a lot of computers, and we hire a lot of people to figure out what the interest rate should be. Well, that's totally contradicts everything Austrian economics teaches, because it has to be set by the marketplace. And so this is probably the most important price around, is the fixing of the interest rates by the Federal Reserve, and that what they're doing is trying to regulate the economy. Oh, there's prices going up, so what we better do is we better increase the economy, and we print more money. On and again, they have no idea what they should do, and that's why the trends and the trends in what's happening are predictable. But to decide when the dollar is going to meet its fate, it's systematically and slowly and steadily eroding. But, you don't know exactly what date everybody gives up on it. But there's a lot of rumblings, and you'll never be able to separate this monetary policy from our foreign policy, because our empire, we throw our weight around and we threaten people with militarism, and we also threaten them with financial penalties and interfere with free trade and putting on sanctions. So we don't have as many friends out there. We at one time were well respected because the reputation was that we were the champions of sound money and liberty. But that's not the case now. That's why things are held together very loosely, and we have to be prepared for what's coming. And quite frankly, I think the most important thing is for us to contribute to a broader and a sounder understanding about monetary policy and why you can't have fiat money and think it's going to work.
No.
I think the solution is obviously using the Constitution as a guideline for what we have. Think about peace and prosperity as a consequence of liberty, and that there's still a lot of people that believe that way, and I think our numbers are actually growing. But the people who are making the most noise and have the sounding microphone, they do outnumber the people who say that we should live in a different manner and we should follow the Constitution no matter what year it was written. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.